Thanks, Karen.
All right, so we are live now. This is our fourth or fifth teacher chat, I think. And today we've got Karen and Brian joining us, and we're going to be talking about UDL, which to me, right, I mean, the whole point of the teacher chat was kind of be a mix of like kind of just what it's like of just being being teachers and just talking with other teachers and learning different things and kind of sharing what we're doing in our classrooms. Because I'm still a high school science teacher. And so Brian told me about UDL about a year ago, and I felt really silly that I'd never even heard this term before. Because accessibility and assistive technology and all these different kind of things were like really important to me. And that was one of the things why I started talking with Brian anyways, because I was like, hey, like, how are you using insert learning in special ed? And then he started telling me about UDL, and I was like, what is this? Like, this sounds amazing. And then at the EdSurge Fusion conference that I went to about a week and a half ago, there's a lot of really interesting things about UDL, and I got to see a lot of the amazing research they're doing of like really in-depth research that they're doing about how it impacts the brain and learning and how we actually learn. And so that kind of was what spurred this, sort of like, we should have a teacher chat about this. So Karen, let's start off with you. Go ahead and introduce yourself. Who are you? What do you do?
Hey, Matt. So great to be here. I am an assistive and educational technology consultant. I work in the greater Boston area. UDL is my passion. I love that you're a gen ed teacher, gen ed high school teacher, because you are the people that need to hear about this. You are in the front lines. The students are in your classrooms. So what is UDL? It's all about proactively, intentionally embedding a variety of approaches to reach all the learners in your classroom. And what that means is you offer multiple methods of engagement, multiple methods of expression, and multiple methods of presentation of information. It's proactive, it's embedded, it's really great teaching, but it's very intentional. Brian, do you want to add anything more to that and tell us who you are?
I think it's important. I'm Brian Friedlander. I'm a associate professor of education, College St. Elizabeth in New Jersey, and also, like Karen, an assistive technology consultant in New Jersey. And just to kind of jump on what Karen was saying, it's really about teachers thinking about lessons and thinking about the range of different learning styles in the classroom. And as Karen says, being proactive and giving when the teacher is teaching, is being able to represent that information differently so that students who learn differently can take in the information that's more consistent with their learning style. So that's really important to me. And I think that's what I like really insert learning. It allows teachers to really kind of craft the lesson and craft the resources that are on the web very, very easily. And when you do that, and when you're using computers, we know kids are very engaged. And for those kids that really enjoy the engagement, the opportunity to have discussions through through the website with Insert Learning is fantastic. And for teachers to also to assess what the students are learning on the web is important as well.
I think to piggyback to what Brian just said too, we acknowledge variability when we incorporate universal design for learning principles into our instructional methods. We are just acknowledging everybody learns in a unique way. And so that's one of the things, again, I discovered this product like 6 months ago, and I love Insert Learning. I think it is such a fantastic tool for universal design. You want me to talk about what UDL aspects I see about it, Matt?
Well, before we even get into that, I mean, how did UDL come about? Because for me, I remember in my teaching courses, differentiation was presented very much to me as almost this idea of like, I'll kind of create like a different type of lesson for different students, or this lesson will be approaching this way, and this one will be, for the kinesthetic learners, something like that. But it felt like very kind of disjointed of like, I'm going to focus on this type of student for this lesson. Whereas UDL is a very different approach. I mean, so how did UDL even come about? Like, how long has it been? Like, how, like, as a term, how long has it existed? Where did it all come from?
It actually came out of the field of architecture. So when you think about universal design, what do you think of when you think of universal design? Typically, you think of curb cuts. They're put in place for people with limitations, people with wheelchairs. Who benefits? Everybody. Lever door handle. Who benefits from lever door handles? Everybody. You're carrying a child, you're carrying your packages, you can open that door with your elbow. So the whole point of universal design is when we design and embed it into our environment, everybody benefits, even though it was initially put in place for someone with disabilities. So the cast out of a local company here in Massachusetts grabbed onto that concept, and then they applied it to the classroom. They took the whole basic principle and applied it to universal design in the classroom for learning, thinking that what we are doing for students who are on IEPs, students identified as having special needs, if we accommodate for that type of learner, then again, we are reaching all learners in our classroom. We're making our instruction universal. And so it came from architecture and then evolved into the classroom setting.
All right, well, Brian, I'm going to send you the question then of what do you say to a teacher, though, that kind of whose response is, that sounds really great, but it sounds like a lot more work. Like curb cuts, they cost more money and they, they take a little bit more time. And, so like that kind of thing of like, it sounds great, but it sounds like it's going to take me more time. And I just don't have that as a teacher.
Well, I think, as Karen was talking, one of the things that we need to think about when we talk about UDL is that it's done at the beginning. So it's not like it's an add-on. We've seen kind of ramps added onto buildings, and we know they don't look well, they don't design, they don't work well, they're not designed well. So when teachers are beginning to craft their lessons, they need to incorporate these at the beginning so that it becomes part of their practice. And CAST, the Center for Applied Special Technology in the Boston area, has been doing a lot of work. Oh my God, it must be over 20 years now with UDL. And they've actually created some great online resources and a UDL lesson builder to help teachers begin to think differently about how they craft their lesson, so that taking these different facets of engagement, representation, and also students being able to show their work differently. So I think using lesson builder and beginning to think about this at the beginning of the planning stages will make it a lot easier. Plus, it's going to make it easier when they actually instruct. They're not going to come across obstructions and detours when they begin to work with kids that have tremendous variability of learning in their classroom. So it's like, you pay now or you pay later, in terms of the students not getting what they need to learn. So it's important for teachers to start the planning phases at the very beginning of the lesson planning.
All right, I'm going to tweet out a link right now to that lesson builder that you were just talking about from CAST.
And Matt, I think your point is really important, because we're giving teachers we're requiring so much of teachers. But what I'd like to suggest to teachers is think about what you're currently doing. Is what you're doing reaching all the learners in your classroom? Maybe, if we're honest, maybe we're reaching 50 to 75%. So what happens to that 25 or 50%? If we can replace something that is less effective with a UDL approach that is most effective, then our students benefit. So we've got to reflect on our current practices and think about how we can reach all the learners in our classrooms.
I like that you said that so at the personalized learning conference with EdSurge and Digital Promise the other week, that was the number one selling point that I was hearing from superintendents that had switched their whole district to personalized learning and were really making the push. And that was their thing that they used to convince parents and teachers and students that in really high performing districts of, are you okay with students not learning in your class? Because if you just do a traditional teacher-led instruction, you have teachers or students no matter what that aren't learning. So are you okay with students not learning in class? That's
I'm sort of reminded, I wish I had kept it of a comic strip where you see the teacher going, oh, I created a great lesson, and then the block next to it, but did the student learn? And I think that's the piece that teachers need to understand. They can craft what they think is a great lesson, but the bottom line is, did the students really learn the concept or the idea or what you wanted them to? And taking UDL into account, that's the piece or the facets that's going to help them reach their goals and ensure that the students are getting what they need in their learning.
Well, so what are some good places, like, so for a teacher, they want to get started. This is like a new concept for them. There's like, this sounds great, I'm on board with it. What's a good way to kind of get started? Like, should they read a book? Like, yeah, how do you kind of get started?
Brian, you want to go first? Because I've been dominating.
I mean, certainly, if they go to cast.org, there's tremendous resources. CAST also put their first book, I think it was Learning in the Digital Age or Reading in the Digital Age. It's online. But they have a tremendous amount of resources. And, you know, CAST also does regional, you know, workshops. A lot of school districts I've worked with have had CAST come in and do, you know, kind of theory into practice. So there's lots of resources on the web, and, you know, CAST would be a great place. And there's lots of books that are published as well about universal design for learning.
There's also udlcenter.org, which is another great resource. And I have to put in a plug. Joyce Valenza and I created a wiki about 10 years ago, the UDL Tech Toolkit Wiki. And if you just Google it, it's UDL Tech Toolkit. It'll be the very first choice, and teachers all over the world are using it. And what it is it does explain what universal design for learning is all about. But it also lists a variety of free resources for literacy, for math, for written expression, for digital multimedia. So it's all free resources. So that's another place for teachers to start learning more, or start learning about the tools that they can use that can help promote universal design in their classrooms. Shameless self-promotion, but again, it's all free.
Good stuff.
Okay, all right. So you guys have talked a little bit about InsertLearning. What are some other tools that you found to be useful when you're applying UDL concepts to a lesson?
Well, certainly, I know I always look for, you know, help teachers look for websites that are interactive. So in the area of math, as a matter of fact, tonight I'll be teaching about, you know, virtual manipulatives, or using video for instruction. So I think those things are important to help kids understand concepts and ideas using, you know, visual supports, picture supports. And I know, you know, Karen and I, we talked a lot about using text to speech. You know, audio supports can be very helpful as well. Maybe, Karen, you want to follow up with that?
So one of the things that I always look for is, does the tool also offer options and flexibility? And does it include the opportunity to record your voice? Because many students have meltdowns when it comes to written expression or holding a pencil, or they really struggle in that area, because if you do a task analysis of written expression, there are so many places where there can be breakdown. And so I look for that kind of flexibility so that it's multisensory. And that's one of the things that I love about InsertLearning, is it does have that capability to record yourself, as well as it provides really awesome scaffolded supports for students that are embedded throughout the article that they're reading. Because a lot of times we ask students to read something, and what do we do? How do we assess their understanding? We ask them questions once after they're done reading. We've got kids who have working memory issues, kids who have processing speed issues, kids who have executive function issues, and that is really overwhelming for them. So the product like what you've created, Matt, is really tremendous to support those kinds of learners.
All right, we have got our first question on our teacher chats. It's from Janet, and she had the question of, how could you use InsertLearning in world language? So I think there's a lot of different ways we could go with this. But I kind of want to hear like from the UDL experts. So because you were just talking about like that, just that whole area anyways, of just kind of like speaking and reading and all that kind of stuff. What do you guys think? What would be a good way of using InsertLearning for world language?
I mean, certainly teachers being able to embed themselves giving instructions in the language that they're teaching can be something that, both from a perspective of engaging the students, because the teacher is giving the directions, or they can even embed videos from YouTube could be one way of doing it, or having the students also use the video function in a notepad as well could be another way that they could use it.
And the other thing I always say too is, what's the point of what you're asking the students to do? And then you build from there. So you need to know what the purpose is of the assignment and what you're asking of the students with the world language. I think Brian just gave some excellent ideas, but again, it does depend on what you are expecting of the students, and then you can kind of think creatively and innovatively based on that.
In addition, I mean, teachers can set up, chats or discussions that students are responding in, in whatever the language that they're learning. So, again, in a different format for certain students to maybe work on their writing skills in that particular language.
And then just, again, we're piggybacking off of each other. The other thing that I always suggest to teachers too is, you've got a baseline of what's currently happening, how your students are responding based on the traditional or your current methods. Implement a tool like InsertLearning and see what difference it makes in terms of student engagement, in terms of quality and quantity of student work, and see what impact it makes, because we believe anecdotally that it does make a difference. So that gives you the opportunity to really assess, how does using a tool like this, and then how can I expand on it as well.
And the other thing too is with so many schools moving to the Google platform, the fact that it's integrated with Classroom is really key. It gives teachers another way to create an interactive activity using web resources and then push it into the classroom environment, the Google Classroom environment.
And then one other thing too, Matt, you recently added in those lesson templates. And so you talked earlier about how can we save time. UDL sounds like it's going to use a lot of time. So that the fact that you added in those 10 very generic questions that are not Googleable really will help teachers save time in terms of creating a lesson or supplementing a lesson that's universally designed.
What I like that of the idea of like it kind of makes me think of we've been kind of experimenting or talking a lot about like, how do you measure student engagement on things? Because it's such a weird term. As we've been talking with some different companies about how they measure engagement, and we're even throwing around the idea of like, what if we use software to determine what types of what kind of lesson elements engage students the most, and even have it like kind of recommend of like, oh, like, hey, like you haven't added any videos yet or any media, you should add in at least 2 pieces of media because your students seem to be more engaged. Add that in, almost of like a UDL kind of like automated template to kind of analyze lessons. Like, hey, like these are some suggestions you could add in. So I like that. Of like we're gonna have to talk some more about like some UDL, like a template of like, here are some things that you can add in to your lessons of like kind of these things. Almost kind of like a checklist.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing too is, I mean, while we've been talking about video, I mean, there's no reason why you couldn't embed audio, embed interactive objects, from science websites. So there's lots of different, interactive objects that can be added with InsertLearning, which makes it, I think, very dynamic.
I'm going to share my screen real quick because for Janet, for your response, because I was talking with one of the foreign language teachers that I work with, had that question, and one of the things we kind of came up with, because the teacher was already using, the teacher was actually taking foreign newspapers, but then he was spending like a lot of time kind of like working with that, and I was like, oh my gosh, like we could just use InsertLearning, and then we had kind of the idea of like, depending upon the level of the students, you could take the foreign newspaper and then kind of put in a translation here or translate specific words for them, and then kind of like add in little notes for the students. So depending upon like what things your students are going to know, you could add in other stuff. But then then you could add in videos. So then you could have this and then record a video of you speaking that paragraph out loud, or have your students record that paragraph, like them speaking that paragraph out loud, or them kind of like translating it or asking kind of questions as they're going through.
But But Matt, see that energy and that excitement that you're sharing? That's what Insert Learning is all about, because it's so flexible and so customizable. That's why I love sharing it with teachers, and they're like, they get that aha moment of, this is incredible. And I love how you just shared that. That was fantastic.
Think of all the possibilities.
Right. There's a kindergarten teacher in Minnesota here that I follow her. I think I like everything that she posts on Twitter, because there's always so many different creative ideas, and so many of them, but she's had a lot of really creative ideas of using Insert Learning, of like, you know, using it for like children's books and adding in her own recordings of where, even though her kids can't read, you know, just like having them on the act of going to a page, and even though they can't read it, like they're experiencing that, and then she embeds videos of her reading the text out loud to them. It's kind of a neat thing. All right, well, we are almost out of time here. I'm going to show off real quickly one thing we added last night, but we really have not showed it off. We're going to be doing a little bit of testing here, so give us some feedback. But in the lessons section, we have now added in the public library. And I tweeted it out the other day. And these are all lessons that teachers have shared over about the last year, because when you create a lesson, it gives you the option of sharing one, or if you want to publicly list it. And not a lot of teachers knew about it. Where was that? When you click on share, and then if you want to publicly list this link, then you can do that. But a lot of teachers were clicking that link even though they didn't really know where it was going to go. Well, this is where it's been going. We've kind of had this hidden. And so it's been neat to kind of go through here, because there's been a lot of people. Sasha, there's yours, that have like posted them. Sasha posted a comment on our YouTube live page. Allison's one of the teachers that I work with. And so it's been kind of neat of like now seeing that. And so what you can do is you can click on that, and then it loads up a preview of that lesson. And then if you want to, you can then copy that lesson once we get past New York Times
Ads, yeah.
there, right? And then it gives you the option that if you want to, now you can copy that lesson after you've kind of previewed it. So you can kind of go through and do it that way. So it's kind of a neat thing. So I'm really excited about this. Eventually, we're going to be adding in tagging and different things like that. And I think that's where it'll be fun to think about, like not only for subject areas and classes and stuff like that, but of like, right, then like for the teachers of like, right, like I have, you know, had UDL, like I approach my lessons with UDL in mind as I'm creating them, to kind of help teachers kind of like, you know, give them little guides of like, oh, like this is kind of like a lesson I want to check out because of these things. So some really exciting things. All right, well, Brian and Karen, thank you very much for kind of explaining to us what UDL is and what you do. And I'll put links I'll put your Twitter handles in the description of this video, as well as some links that you guys described and talked about in tonight's chat. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for everything you're doing with this product. It's really a fantastic, it's a great tool. Thanks so much for this.
Yes, absolutely. Take care, Karen. See you soon.
See you, bye.
You guys make it fun.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks. Bye, everybody.
Bye.